The good news is that the FIT21 bill has passed the House of Representatives. The bad news is that it might not ever pass the Senate. Fortunately, it does give us a pretty good idea of what a passing regulatory framework for crypto might actually look like in the future. And that future looks pretty good for Cardano, while a lot of other blockchains might be screwed. If you have absolutely never used kettlebells while wearing a space helmet, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Here it is, the FIT21 bill, also known as the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act. We've talked about this particular bill many times for a long, long time. And it was just recently part of this giant U turn where the House and the Senate decided to repeal the Staff Accounting Bulletin 121 from the SEC. And then all of a sudden, the Ethereum ETFs were approved. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of Democrats crossed the aisle in the House and helped in passing this FIT21 bill. The only problem, and this is a fantastic U-turn in US crypto policy. We really haven't seen anything like this for the last 3 years and change. We've pretty much just been bludgeoned to death by the Dragon and the SEC and Gary Gensler and the White House and bad crypto policy. They've been trying to smother and kill crypto, kill it in its cradle like a very promising and talented young infant. They've been trying to kill it in its cradle because before it could become an adult, before it could bloom into an adult and become, the very talented and capable industry that it's meant to be. They've been trying to kill it for the last 3.5 years. They haven't been able to. And then all of a sudden we get this giant U-turn. This is pretty much as predicted. Last year, we talked on this channel quite a bit about the prediction that they would be real tough on crypto. And then at some point, par way through the year, they would get too close to the election, realize how big crypto actually is, that it was going to affect the election. And then all of a sudden, they were going to get real soft on crypto. And we'd see no more hardball on crypto. It was going to be like, oh, actually, we were real pro crypto all along. See, look what we just did. This is that moment. This is that moment where they do the big U-turn and they're like, oh, we might lose the election. We better court these crypto voters, even though we've been bludgeoning them to death with bad policy for the last 3.5 years. Let's all of a sudden pretend like we're really pro crypto. That's what's happening right now. Only they're not even really doing a good enough job. I don't think anybody in crypto is not going to be able to see through this. I mean, I think we know this administration, very anti-crypto, very anti-crypto. So I don't know if they're actually going to get any of our votes, but I think they have gotten really scared about the election. So all of a sudden, some good things are happening. That doesn't mean that this bill is going to pass the Senate. In fact, most of the predictions I see are that it is not even going to be considered by the Senate. They're not even going to vote on this bill in the Senate because the Senate hasn't been very interested in this kind of thing. But the Senate did pass the repeal of Staff Accounting Bulletin 121. That's a pretty big deal. And we did get the Ethereum ETFs. Obviously, that's not a legislative function. That's just something that happens inside the SEC. But very surprising things have happened just in the last 2 weeks. So I don't foreclose any possibilities. Having said that, though, reasonable analysts all seem to be saying that this thing will not pass the Senate. This will not get in the Senate. There for a bunch of mechanical reasons, and also just that not enough senators are interested in it. There's no companion bill to bring it into the Senate. There's a whole bunch of reasons. We're probably not going to see this passing the Senate anytime soon. However, this is still really valuable to look at because it did pass the House, and it gives us an idea of what kind of integrated crypto regulatory framework could possibly pass both houses of the US Congress. If we were able to get a bunch of Democrats to cross the aisle and vote for this thing, the ideas present in this bill have a good chance of popping up in the crypto regulatory framework that will eventually pass. The beautiful thing is that while this isn't perfect for crypto, this is not the kind of regulatory framework we would probably choose for ourselves. This isn't all good for crypto. It is pretty good for Cardano. Cardano looks really good for a bunch of reasons under this kind of regulatory framework. And a lot of our competitor blockchains don't look so good. They might be screwed if some of these concepts end up in the final regulatory framework that we get at some point in the future. So let's talk about what this bill does. And there's a lot of material here and way too much for any one video. This would bore everyone to death. I could make a video where I go through every single section of this entire bill, and approximately 0 people would watch that video. It'd be very boring and it wouldn't be valuable to anyone. If you want that depth of information, you should just read the bill. But that's not going to be 99.9% of you. So we're just going to talk about the important parts here. Largely, what this bill does is it divides the crypto world. It divides jurisdiction over the crypto world between the CFTC and the SEC. And it does this both for sort of initial issuances of crypto assets and for sales, secondary sales, sales down the road of crypto assets. And it does this the way regulatory frameworks always do this kind of thing by creating siloed definitions, these sort of different categories, these classifications of different things, including crypto assets. So the first thing you need to know is that we're just going to call crypto assets digital assets. That's going to be the catch-all term for any, as they put it here, fungible digital representation of value that can be exclusively possessed and transferred person to person without necessary reliance on an intermediary and is recorded on a cryptographically secured public distributed ledger. That definition probably surprises no one. This is just the definition of decent crypto assets. From there, crypto assets are largely going to fall into one of two sub-classifications. They're going to be called restricted digital assets and digital commodities. Guess which one of those two you want to be, not the restricted one. Like in a lot of regulation, you always want to be not the restricted one. That's usually the one you don't want to be. Sometimes you do, but largely that's the one that's going to give you less freedom to do the things you want to do. And in this case, in crypto, you definitely are going to want to be a digital commodity. And as the name implies, that means you are not going to be dealing with the SEC as much. Commodity, it's right in the name of the CFTC. You want to be over on the CFTC side. I mean, that could turn out to be untrue in the long run. They could build up this giant, regulatory framework that we hate over there to deal with our digital commodities, and they could get some really tough Gensler-esque commissioner of the CFTC or something like that. But that's yet to be seen. What we do know is that being under the SEC, under the Gensler SEC, is not a good place to be. So we're going to want to be digital commodities. So let's look first at this definition of digital commodities, and then we'll talk about how this plays out in terms of how you can sell crypto assets when they fit into these definitions of restricted digital assets versus digital commodities. So first, the good one, digital commodities. Any unit of a digital asset held by a person other than the issuer, a related person, or an affiliated person. And they give you a definition of affiliates. You can guess what this means. These are insiders. So if you're just a person and you're not the issuer and you're not an insider, you're not some other insider, you are pretty much just a regular consumer in crypto. You're a part of retail. You're just a regular person in crypto. So if you have a crypto asset, which we're going to call digital assets here, before the first date on which each blockchain to which that digital asset relates. So the blockchain, any blockchain, each blockchain that this crypto asset lives on, if you hold it before, if you're holding it before the first date on which that digital asset blockchain is a functional system and certified to be a decentralized system. So we're saying you have a crypto asset and the blockchain it's on is functional. It's like working and doing all the stuff you expect it to do. And it's been certified to be decentralized. Okay, we're going to talk about the definition of a decentralized system in just a second. So put that in your back pocket. Remember, it has to be functional. The blockchain has to be functional and has to be certified as a decentralized system. And we'll talk about what that second part means, but just sort of like file that in your back pocket for a second. So if those things are true and this crypto asset was issued to you at through an end user distribution, or it was acquired by you in a transaction that was executed on a digital commodity exchange, then it's going to be a digital commodity. And we're going to talk about what an end user distribution is as well. So that's another one, file in your back pocket. So we're going to follow up on the definitions of a decentralized system and a distribution, an end user distribution. So that's for a normal person in crypto, retail, a consumer. So now we've got any unit. So this is going to be a slightly different definition. Any unit, and this is another definition of a digital commodity, any unit of a digital asset held by a person other than the issuer or an affiliate or an insider after the first date on which each of the blockchains is certified to be a decentralized system and it's functional. So far, similar to above, and any unit of a digital asset held by a related person or an affiliated person during any period when any blockchain system to which the digital asset relates is functional and certified to be decentralized. So these are three different categories that meet this definition, this good definition of digital commodity. So you might be asking, how is that second one? The third one is obviously about insiders. How is that second one different? So the first one is before the date that it's decentralized and functional, it can still be a digital commodity if it was issued to you through an end user distribution. The second one is it's also a digital commodity if you are holding it after the first date on which the blockchain is functional and it's certified to be a decentralized system. If you're a regular person, this third one is if you're an insider, then it's a digital commodity during any time when the blockchain is currently decentralized and functional. So the difference between number 2 and number 3 here, Romanet 2 and Romanet 3, obviously one is about regular people and number 3 is about insiders, but also number 2 for consumers is basically anytime after this first date. So anytime in the future past this date when it's functional and decentralized. Number 3, which is for insiders, is this definition where you have to be in a period when it is functional and decentralized. What that means is for consumers, the way I'm reading this, for consumers, if it at any point is functional and decentralized, then you're kind of good to go forever. But for insiders, if it is decentralized and functional, and then it becomes no longer functional, then you no longer meet this definition. So it's a stricter definition for insiders here. And then you've got sort of two definitions for consumers, depending on whether you're before the date of functionality and decentralization or after. And you only meet it if it's before, if it was an end user distribution. So let's get into the definitions of decentralized system and end user distributions. Here's the definition of end user distribution. And remember, if it's before the date of decentralization and functionality for consumers, then it has to have been an end user distribution. An end user distribution means an issuance of a unit of this crypto asset that does not involve an exchange of more than a nominal value of cash or property and is distributed in a broad, equitable, and non discretionary manner based on conditions capable of being satisfied by any participant in the blockchain system, including as an incentive based reward to users of the digital asset or any blockchain system to which the digital asset relates for activities directly related to the operation of the blockchain system, such as mining, validating, staking, or other activity directly related to the operation of the blockchain system, or to the existing holders of another digital asset in proportion to the total units of such other digital assets as are held by each person. So, what they're saying here is if it's a mining reward, or if it's a staking reward, if it's a delegation reward, or if it's something like an airdrop, then they're going to consider it an end user distribution. So, your staking rewards, my reading of this is that your staking rewards, your mining rewards, your validation rewards, those would qualify as end user distributions, and you would be good to go even if it was before, if you're a consumer, even if it's before the date of decentralization and functionality of the blockchain. Pretty good deal for consumers, right? So let's say it's not an end user distribution. It's not a staking reward or a mining reward or something like that, or you're an insider. So in either of those two cases, then the blockchain's got to be functional and it's got to be certified as a decentralized system. We'll talk in just a second about how the certification process works, but first let's talk about what a decentralized system is under this FIT21 bill. So that would mean, for it to be a decentralized system, would mean that during the last year, no person had the unilateral authority to directly or indirectly, through any contract, arrangement, understanding, relationship, or otherwise, to control or materially alter the functionality or operation of the blockchain system. So that would mean that nobody can alter the way the blockchain works. Nobody can do it on their own unilaterally. They have to do it as part of some wider, say, governance system. So, or here's another thing that cannot exist for it to be a decentralized system, or any person had the unilateral authority to restrict or prohibit any person who is not a digital asset issuer, a related person, or an affiliated person from using, earning, or transmitting the asset, deploying software that uses or integrates with the blockchain system, participating in a decentralized governance system with respect to the blockchain system, or operating a node, validator, or other form of computational infrastructure with respect to the blockchain system. So what they're saying there is it has to meet the, you know, very common classical traits of a good blockchain, that it is permissionless and that there is some kind of censorship resistance. So nobody can restrict anyone from using the digital asset, and no one can stop you if you want to deploy the software, if you want to operate a node, if you want to operate a validator, a stake pool. Nobody can stop you. It's permissionless. So we can see there a blockchain like, Bitcoin or Cardano. They are going to be good there because nobody can stop you from running the software that would allow you to mine Bitcoin, or create a stake pool in Cardano. In the case of Bitcoin, the cost of the ASICs, the application specific integrated circuits that would be required to mine effectively, might be cost prohibitive, but nobody can stop you from deploying the software. It's permissionless and there's censorship resistance in both those blockchains. So they would both be good on that count. And you'll notice I didn't talk about this first part in terms of Cardano. No one has the unilateral authority to control or materially alter the functionality or operation of the blockchain system. And it is actually kind of true in both Cardano and in Bitcoin, because as we know from the history of Cardano, even if IOG wants to put in place an upgrade to the Cardano node, the stake pool operators all have to adopt it. They can just refuse to upgrade to the new node. So even IOG and Cardano, even while IOG and the other founding entities, even while their keys, their Genesis keys, are still in existence, or whatever we're calling the keys these days, even while they're still in existence, they can't unilaterally upgrade the system because the stake pool operators, the SPOs, actually have to agree. They actually have to upgrade their individual stake pools. IOG can't do that for them. So I would argue that Cardano, as well as Bitcoin, meet even that first requirement. Then we've got this B part down here. During the past 12 months, no digital asset issuer or affiliated person beneficially owned in the aggregate 20% or more of the total amount of units of this crypto asset. And they have some caveats here of the digital asset that can be created, issued, or distributed, and were freely transferable or otherwise used or available to be used for the purposes of such a blockchain system. So no matter how we cut this, though, a lot of blockchains are going to have a lot of trouble with this because a lot of VC type blockchains, the whole point was that they were going to own gigantic chunks. In the aggregate, the insiders owned way more than 20%. Cardano and Ethereum famously are some of the only blockchains in exist. There are some others, but they're some of the only blockchains that came after the first generation where the insiders didn't take much more than 20%. They could not overcome the greed. They knew that 20% was a good number, and the drafters of this bill knew that 20% was a good number, but in a lot of blockchains, the whole point, the whole reason for being for the blockchain was for a bunch of venture capitalists and a bunch of founders to make a lot of money. So they kept a lot more than 20%. So they're going to have a lot of trouble meeting this. They're not going to be deemed decentralized systems if any issuer or affiliated person beneficially owned in the aggregate 20% or more of the assets. And then we've got these caveats down below: the assets that could be created and were freely transferable. So in a lot of cases, if a lot of the assets were not freely transferable, if a lot of them aren't in issuance or being used in some way already in the blockchain system, it's going to be even harder for them to meet this criteria. So a lot of these blockchains, these VC blockchains, where the insiders kept huge amounts of the coin. I'm not going to name any names, but we all know which ones those are. We've all looked at the Masari table that shows the pie charts where all of these newer blockchains, it seems like not all of them, but a great many of them, the insiders kept way more than 20%. And the question then you have to ask, the defenders of those blockchains, the advocates of those blockchains might say, oh, well, the insiders will just sell down to the point where they're below 20%. So if the insiders own these gigantic swaths of the coin and they have to sell down to 20%, you know what that's going to do to the capitalization numbers of those blockchains? When you go to the charts and you look at the price of those coins as the insiders are trying to sell down from these crazy figures down to 20%, there's going to be some price action. There's going to be some price action in some of those blockchains as the insiders try to do this. So you notice this is a little ambiguous though. It says no digital asset issuer or affiliated person beneficially owned in the aggregate 20% or more of the total amount of units. So this doesn't say all digital asset issue the issuer along with all affiliated persons beneficially owned in the aggregate 20%. It says no digital asset issuer or affiliated person beneficially owned in the aggregate 20%. So we're not talking about, this is a little bit ambiguous, but they say no. If it said no digital asset issuer or single affiliated person beneficially owned in the aggregate 20%, it'd be a little bit clearer, but they say no digital asset issuer or affiliated person. They didn't say affiliated persons in the aggregate. So there's a little bit of a caveat there. Then we've got voting restrictions. They don't want anybody to have unilateral authority to direct the voting of 20% or more of the outstanding voting power, or they don't want the situation where the digital asset did not include voting power with respect to any decentralized governance system of the blockchain system. So if this is a crypto asset that does not include voting power, if you don't have a vote in the blockchain with this digital asset, it is not going to qualify under the voting part of this definition of decentralized system. So a lot of these, a lot of these second and third gen VC coins, there's going to be a kind of a big problem because in a lot of them, you've got this 20% ownership problem. A lot of blockchains are going to find that they run afoul of that. Then you've got this problem where there's no voting system. A lot of blockchains haven't done what Cardano has put so much time and thought into, and that's Voltaire. Cardano is going to have on chain governance very soon, and we will all have a vote. What other blockchains have done that? Some have, a lot haven't. Ask yourself if you've held Ethereum or you're holding Ethereum. I held Ethereum for a long time. I think now I only have Dust. Have I ever been asked to vote on anything in Ethereum? No, I have not. If that is the case with a blockchain, that's kind of a problem here. No vote is included with this crypto asset. This is a huge problem for a lot of blockchains because they haven't been working towards something like Voltaire, like Cardano has. Has it been, has a huge amount of energy probably been put in by the founding entities, including IOG, into Voltaire? Yes, it has. Was that a waste of time? Obviously not. If we end up with a regulatory framework that looks anything like this and voting is required to be included with the asset, then a lot of blockchains are not going to qualify as decentralized systems while Cardano will. Next up, we've got restrictions as to things like upgrades. It says during the previous 3 months, the digital asset issuer nor any affiliated or related person has implemented or contributed any intellectual property to the source code of the blockchain system. As a practical matter, we probably don't also want them contributing intellectual problems, but here they mean intellectual property. So, no intellectual property contributed to the code in the last 3 months that alters the functionality or operation of the blockchain system, unless it is to address some vulnerability, some error, regular maintenance, a cybersecurity risk, some other technical change to the blockchain system, which is overly broad. I don't think this is the right way to have drafted that last piece, or you can do those things if they were adopted through the consensus or agreement of a decentralized governance system. So the definition of decentralized governance system is something that would probably be litigated pretty hard here. But again, if you don't have a decentralized governance system, then you're going to get disqualified from this definition if the issuer or any affiliated or related person has contributed any IP to the source code in the last 3 months. Again, huge problem for a lot of these VC type chains. Another one, during the previous 3 months, neither any digital asset issuer nor any affiliated person has marketed to the public the digital assets as an investment. This is going to be a problem for a lot of blockchains that have done a ton of advertising of their crypto assets as an investment. Another one, during the previous 12 months, all issuances of such digital asset through the programmatic functioning of the blockchain system were end user distributions. So again, for a lot of these competitor chains, if the if there were any issuances of the digital asset in the last year that were through the programmatic functioning of the blockchain system that weren't end user distributions, then that's going to be a problem for a lot of these blockchains, and they won't meet the definition of decentralized system, which means that they won't be digital commodities for the insiders or for the retail consumers using the digital asset in the case where it wasn't an end user distribution. So, of course, that was the definition of a digital commodity, the definition you want to fall under. The definition you don't want to fall under is restricted digital asset. And that's pretty much just the inverse. It's if you don't qualify as a digital commodity, you are probably going to be a restricted digital asset. So we won't go through and lay out all of the sort of uh, opposite traits here, but pretty much if you fail any of those requirements to be a digital commodity, you're going to end up being a restricted digital asset, and it's going to be all the same criteria around uh, whether or not the blockchain is a decentralized system and whether or not you held the asset before or after that point. If you're a consumer, and if you are a consumer and you held it before that point, then it has to be an end user distribution. So just the opposite of the definition of a digital commodity. And the reason these definitions are going to be very important is they determine how you can sell your crypto based on what category you fall in. Okay, here's when you can sell. If you are a consumer, you can sell restricted digital assets on a digital asset trading system. So they're introducing a new category. We won't go over the definition of a digital asset trading system, but just know this is going to be a specific type of regulated platform you would have to be trading on. This is if it's a restricted digital asset, the one you don't want to be. So if you're a consumer, you could sell a restricted digital asset on a digital asset trading system if the Section 43 info has been made public and certified quarterly. So, what is the Section 43 info? Well, this is Section 42. Section 43 is just this one right down here, and it's all the kinds of things you would expect. So, these things all have to be certified and made public. The source code, the transaction history, the digital asset economics, we call it tokenomics, the current state and timeline for the development of the blockchain system, showing how and when the blockchain system intends to be considered a functional system and a decentralized system. So, again, we come back to functional and decentralized. A list of the people who are involved in the dev work, risk factor disclosures. That's just like any securities filing. And here's some information about the certification. So, all this information has to be made public and certified quarterly. So, every single quarter, this has to be certified in order for even consumers to trade restricted digital assets on a digital asset trading system. So you can see already why you do not want your crypto asset to be a restricted digital asset. Even for consumers, there's going to be a bunch of requirements to trade it. If you are an insider, you have all those same requirements, but you can only trade your restricted digital asset, if you're an insider, 12 months after the later of the date of acquisition. So you have to hold it for 12 months, and the digital asset maturity date. So the digital asset maturity date is going to be the date on which these assets are registered with the SEC. So something that's never going to happen the way it currently works, or 20% of the digital assets have become digital commodities. So if you're an insider and you're holding restricted digital assets, you can only sell them 12 months after you've acquired them and 12 months after 20% of those crypto assets have become digital commodities. So again, very heightened requirements if it's a restricted digital asset. Not as bad if it's a digital commodity. So you see right down here, in general, subject to paragraph 2, a digital commodity may be offered and sold by any person. So everything is great, blue skies. You can just go ahead and sell if you are a consumer and it's a digital commodity. This is why we very much want it to be a digital commodity. But subject to paragraph 2 is going to have to do with affiliated persons, so insiders. If you're an insider, you can sell a digital commodity if you acquired it as a restricted digital asset. So if when you got it, it was a restricted digital asset, then you can sell it If you've held it for at least 12 months and it's at least 12 months after the digital asset maturity date, so just like if it was a restricted digital asset, and in addition, all the related blockchains are certified to be decentralized and it's sold on a digital commodity exchange. So if you are an insider and it's a digital commodity, then you've got this 12-month waiting period. Has to be 12 months after the digital asset maturity date if it was a restricted digital asset when you got it. And in addition, all the related blockchains have to be certified to be decentralized and you have to sell on a digital commodity exchange. So that's when insiders and consumers can sell both restricted digital assets, the bad one, and digital commodities, the good one. Okay, that was all about how you were going to effectuate secondary sales of crypto assets. Like if you're going to sell your Cardano, for instance, it would fall under that regime because Cardano already exists. But we know there are going to be more crypto assets. More crypto assets will be created and invented. And if it's going to be this sort of comprehensive regulatory framework, we need to have a framework for issuing new assets as well. That's where section 301 comes in. So section 301 basically acknowledges without saying it that in securities law you've basically got two things that you can do. You can register or you can meet an exemption. So they're going to create an exemption for issuing crypto assets. And the exemption is going to work like this. It has to be under 75 million bucks. You can't sell more than 75 million bucks worth of this crypto asset, and you can sell to accredited investors. The buyers can be accredited investors, which, very roughly means they have to make $200,000 or they have to have $1 million in assets, not counting their house. Or you can sell to non-accredited investors. And this is the part that crypto won't like. You can sell to non-accredited investors, which would be most of the crypto investors, most of the regular people in crypto, me and you, non-accredited investors, as long as they have spent less than 10% of their annual income on crypto in the last year. So this is a problem because a lot of you are crypto degens and you are definitely probably spending more than 10% of your annual income. Under FIT21, they would not allow you to do that. You would not be able to spend more than 10% of your annual income on crypto. People are going to hate this. They're going to think it's hypocritical. Why do the rich get to spend as much as they want, but the poor do not even the poor, just the average person who's not making 200K a year, why do they only get to spend 10%? We've talked about this before on this channel. The rationale is that they're protecting people who might be less sophisticated investors. And that, of course, has been debated and questioned. And a lot of people are very critical of that. Of course, I agree. I think people should be able to they should be able to make their own decision about how much they spend on crypto. At the same time, I do understand that that might help, some helpless person in their senior years not get taken advantage of, something like that, some very vulnerable, non-sophisticated investor. This might prevent them from getting, getting cheated out of all of their income, something like that. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Also, no buyer can purchase more than 10% of the issuance. So a buyer cannot purchase more than 10% of the total amounts sold. So after the completion of the transaction. So you couldn't buy like 20% of the total issuance of any crypto asset meeting this exemption. Then the issuer has to file a statement with the SEC showing all of the normal things the SEC would normally require if these were stocks, if these were equities. Things like use of funds, material risks, plans of distribution, description of the issuer's business, material transactions with affiliated persons, the number of employees, the contact info of the issuer, things like source code, tokenomics, the plan to reach decentralization, all those all those kinds of things. And then on top of that, the issuer would then have to file periodic reports. So every 6 months, every year, and every time there's a material change to the past periodic filings, the issuer would have to file these periodic reports with the same kinds of information. And this is exactly what happens in the equities world. This is where 10Qs and 10Ks and 8Ks come from. They're exactly these types of filings. So the filings, these periodic filings, would have to go on. The issuer would have to keep doing this until 180 days, so 6 months after the year in which the blockchain becomes a functional system and is certified to be a decentralized system. The cool thing is, in order to be certified as a decentralized system, anyone can do that. Anyone can certify a blockchain as a decentralized system. They just have to make a filing, make a certified filing of all the things we talked about under the definition of a decentralized system. So as soon as someone does that and the blockchain is functional and decentralized, the issuer just has to wait 6 months until the end of the year when that certification happens. So the certification happens, then whatever year that's in, that year ends, and then 180 days later, the issuer can stop making all these filings. Okay, so that is basically everything you need to know at this point, at least, about how FIT21 works exactly in terms of selling currently existing cryptocurrency assets like Cardano and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the ones that are going to be very difficult to sell under FIT21, and also how you issue new assets under FIT21, as we just discussed. So there's some more caveats, especially to the section about how you issue new assets, like the SEC can rebut the presumption that the certification of decentralization creates. And there's a whole process where eventually you can sue in the US Court of Appeals for DC if the SEC rebuts your certification that the blockchain is decentralized. Those are a bunch of boring details that I don't think are as profitable to discuss right now. Instead, let's talk about some of the interesting short sections of the FIT21 bill, like this one, Section 401. So, what Section 401 does is it amends Section 2A1 of the 33 Act. That's that whole laundry list of things that can be a security. And basically, they're going to tack on the end this sentence: the term security does not include a digital commodity or permitted payment stablecoins. They're carving out exceptions to the definition of security for both digital commodities and permitted payment stablecoins. That's great. That's the kind of common sense crypto legislation we want to see. Again, this probably won't pass the Senate, but we hope things like this will pop up in whatever eventually does pass the Senate. Finally, I will leave you with this last little tidbit. I know it's been a long video, but I wanted to create one video that goes through all of the important sections of the FIT21 bill. And of course, we didn't even accomplish that. There's a lot more important sections in the FIT21 bill, but a video on a bill, a piece of legislation, can only be so long. So we're going to cover this one last fun piece. This is Section 202. It basically says the term security does not include an investment contract asset. And if you've watched the video for a long time, you know whenever you see investment contract in the context of securities law and crypto, we're usually going to end up at the Howey test. And we've done many videos where we discussed all the different prongs of the Howey test and exactly how that works. But what they're saying here is that security does not include an investment contract asset. And investment contract asset is a defined term that means a fungible digital representation of value that can be exclusively possessed and transferred person to person, recorded on a cryptographically secured public distributed ledger, sold or otherwise transferred or intended to be sold pursuant to an investment contract, and is not otherwise a security. So they're going to be making this another little change to the definition of security here. And they're going to say, hey, crypto assets, this is all just basically like crypto assets, are not going to go down this Howey test route. We're no longer going to do that. We're not going to have these we're going to have the SEC filing these lawsuits against the issuers of crypto assets, saying that their investment contracts under some exotic construction of the Howey test. And, a bunch of crypto Twitter lawyers have already pointed out some problems in the language, the way this is built, but I like where this is going. I don't know if this is drafted, perfectly, but I like the idea, the goals they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to take crypto out of the hands of the SEC. They're trying to take crypto out of the Howey test. They're still letting the SEC be involved in the issuance of new crypto assets. But with older crypto assets like Cardano that are going to have very soon an on-chain governance system that actually can be certified as decentralized because you don't have VCs owning more than 20% of the asset, and it's also decentralized in under all the other requirements. Blockchains like that, an asset like ADA on a blockchain like that has voting rights, those types of assets are going to become digital commodities and they're going to be taken out of the hands of the SEC. While this bill isn't perfect, this isn't exactly what we would want as crypto people. Like we don't want some of the restrictions on non-accredited investors and things like that. But this is a pretty good trade if we can get good crypto assets like Cardano out of the hands of the SEC, away from the Howey test. If they can be digital commodities, I think this would be a pretty livable framework. Again, don't know about the restrictions on all of us only spending 10% on our crypto every year. That's pretty difficult. If you're listening to this channel, there's a good chance you may have spent more than 10% of your income at some point in your life on crypto in any given year. But I think a lot of the concepts in this bill are good concepts. They're good for crypto. This is an honest attempt at a good regulatory framework under which crypto can grow and progress and bloom in the US. US crypto policy would no longer be among the worst crypto policies in the world. This would, I think, be if a lot of these ideas end up in whatever legislation eventually gets passed, I think we'll be in a pretty good place. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.